Hey guys, no, I have not worked out this weird focusing issue that this camera has. I don't know why it goes in and out. See, I'm looking at the feeds right here, and it goes like it's not even when I hold it up. Like, okay, cool, it focuses, but then I go back, and sometimes it gets all wonky. It does like this kind of stuff, and other times it was fine. Like, of course, I'm trying to show it go wonky, and it doesn't go wonky, right? Not a big deal. Of course, I am talking about the vice presidential debate that I just watched, and that was interesting. That was something else. That was way different than the first debate. It was the same in some ways, but different in other ways. Um, Pence is much better at this than Biden, than Trump, and then Kamala Harris. Pence is, I mean, he's unbelievably disciplined. Now, here's the thing: Trump and Pence are both selling the same thing. It's just that the commercials that Trump puts on annoy people. They annoy some people. Not some people love it, right? It's like the WWE, right? It's explosive, and other people change the channel when that comes on. But Mike Pence is selling the same exact thing, but he's being calm about it. I like to compare this to car commercials, right? Most brands have a young, exciting, or affordable brand or family brand, and then they have a luxury brand. And the commercials are done completely differently. But I think because most of them end up being so generic, especially when there's like ukuleles playing and stuff, I think the best actually current examples is the difference between the Ford and the Lincoln commercials. Now, a Lincoln is a Ford with leather and extra features and a slightly different body kit. I'm not knocking the Lincoln. I love the Lincoln. In fact, I think the Lincoln is actually the best luxury brand out there in terms of quality and value combined, because it costs basically a third to half of what other luxury brands cost, and it costs a fraction to fix because many of the important parts, are shared with Fords. There's if I were in the market for a luxury vehicle, and I wasn't like some trillionaire who just got some, like, wanted to get something like really crazy, it would be a Lincoln, hands down, because it's just the most affordable, smartest option. But it's a Ford. You're selling a Ford, and the Ford commercials, they're Donald Trump, right? It's exciting, it's hip, it's new. There might be some obnoxious pop song playing. Maybe it's a truck commercial where it's built Ford tough and this truck's pulling stuff that it shouldn't be pulling, and they're talking about titanium, the best metal ever in this frame. It's military grade. You wouldn't believe the technology, right? And so on. Like the Ford commercials, they're bombastic. They're like, "Oh yeah, this is an exciting truck. This is an exciting car." And that appeals to young guys. But when you're, getting up in age and you're looking for, or if you're in the market for a luxury vehicle, that doesn't do anything for it. You see that, you're like, that, yeah, okay, I'm sure that's exciting and all, but that's not really what I'm looking for. But Mike Pence, he's the Lincoln commercials. He's the Matthew McConaughey or whoever the hell else has been doing them recently. Calm, reflective, talks about the quality, the comfort, the lifestyle you want with this vehicle. It's Ford. It's a Ford. It's just a Ford with leather. That's the difference here. But it's sold in a much more nuanced way. They're selling the same product. If you buy mostly Fords or buy mostly Lincolns, as long as the sales are really good overall, then they don't care that much, right? And that's basically what you're voting for with Donald Trump. You're voting for Ford Lincoln, or you're voting for whatever the hell the brand, I guess, Kamala and Biden are. Probably Tata and Fiat, maybe, right? Actually, who's owned by China right now? I guess Volvo, technically. Anyway, this allows basically Pence to be far more effective for not the average person, but for the person who is kind of disturbed with all the divisiveness and all this other stuff. I mean, that was something that the moderator tried to frame, was about the divisiveness, and Kamala tried to do that while being nasty about it. Pence is the one who came off as the uniter. Pence came off as calm and caring about the American people. She just came off as like wanting to crap on everybody. And that was kind of surprising. I didn't expect that mistake to be made. I expected Kamala to be more patronizing, and Pence to have to be more defensive and forceful, and he didn't. He just was well crafted. He was a surgeon, and Kamala was really out of her element. It was kind of surprising. She couldn't be as nasty in the direct attacks as Biden could, because Biden said all kinds of nasty stuff last time, and he didn't get called out on it. But if she does that again, it's going to start to add up. They're going to just have a montage of essentially her and Biden just saying really nasty stuff. Believe it or not, in that last debate, if you go back, like the name calling, Trump called him stupid once in like a roundabout way. And I think he said one other nasty thing, but like Biden called Trump a racist. He called Trump was a bigot. He said something like he's disrespectful. Like it was like the personal attacks were way worse. I think he called him a sexist at one point, right? It was pretty bad. And it's kind of funny. Biden decided to be the attack dog, and in a lot of ways that took the wind out of basically Kamala's ability to be the yin to the yang. They kind of were trying to sell the same thing, but they were both doing a half-ass job of it, right? This was like when you see the exciting and hip commercial, and then you see another commercial that like takes it from another angle, and you're still like, I don't like this car because they're too similar. That's her problem. Now the moderator was not fair. She was slanted. I'm going to play basically a clip here, and it's going to explain what I'm talking about in more detail. She would ask a question to somebody like Kamala, and what it would be was basically, here's a statement of all this awful stuff. Could you please pile on and tell us what you think about how bad the Trump administration did XYZ, right? And then she would turn to Mike Pence and say, I'm going to accuse you of something slightly relevant but completely different, and tell you to respond to that. And it's like basically one person's responding to a layup and the other person's responding to an accusation. That's not how you're supposed to run a debate, period. If she was going to lead with a question like this, she has to essentially provide the same exact opportunity to Mike Pence so that he can actually defend himself. Because otherwise you're just here, Kamala, attack Pence on something, and then I'm going to ask Pence something that now he has to defend that's not to do with the things you just said. Pence didn't take the bait. He didn't answer the question she asked him, but he did respond to Kamala, and he kind of just ignored the fact that the moderator was setting things up. He responded to Kamala. He didn't respond to the moderator. He responded to Kamala the whole time. He kept his eye on the ball, and that was much better and much more disciplined than what Trump did. Trump should have completely the whole time focused on Joe Biden, and instead he got distracted by Chris Wallace. Now, in fairness to Susan here, I think that's her. I forget who what her name is. Salt Lake City. Yeah, it doesn't even say who it is. She didn't do anything that like what Wallace did in terms of like jumping in front of. She at no point jumped in front of Kamala or bailed Kamala out of a bad question. She was not nearly as interruptive as Pence. Pence basically he ran over his times. He had a couple of run-on sentences. He did demand more time to respond to something that Kamala had said, which was well within his right. And then the time in terms of that gave back to Kamala, and then she just kind of completely whiffed on it. So he did have to essentially demand some control from her, but he didn't. When she was interrupting, it was like with Chris Wallace, and Chris Wallace would interrupt Trump. Trump would try to talk. Chris Wallace would get louder and louder, and then Trump would start arguing with Chris Wallace, like, you have to let me respond to this. What the hell? And then all of a sudden Trump's arguing with Wallace. Pence completely avoided saying anything disparaging to her. He just said, I need to respond to Harris, right? His issue with needing to interrupt her was because Harris was saying stuff. He kept the focus between these two, and the moderator was less of an entity. Chris Wallace was frustrating to watch. This lady, I didn't like the way she was setting up a lot of the questions. Her tail end was a lot better. Notice how they completely avoided gun control, because that's a losing issue for the Democrats to even be brought up. They didn't want to talk about the riots. I was really surprised Pence didn't bring up the fact that she bailed out the rioters. But I think he had her on the ropes, and he didn't want to, I guess, take the risk. I think that was a missed opportunity. But overall, Pence, absolute domination there. Absolute discipline. So I'm going to play you literally the first two questions. And the first two questions here, I am going to jump around, but just know, the moderator asks a question, Harris gets to answer. Moderator then asks a different question to Pence. Pence did not get to respond to Kamala. And then Pence actually responded to Kamala in that question. So I want you to hear the difference in the way these questions are presented.
Virus is not under control.
Okay. Let me actually just go back just 2 seconds here. The first thing she says is the coronavirus is not under control, which is a flat-out opinion. There's no merit to say when a virus is under... there's no basis to measure when a virus is under control, because by that same logic, you say cancer's not under control. The flu's not under control. Chickenpox is not under control. Actually, chickenpox, I guess, because there's like a vaccine and stuff. Poison ivy is not under control, right? Like you can say that about almost anything. So that's how she sets this up: is that be afraid, people. The virus isn't under control. She's already setting up in their first sentence what basically what she's softballing Harris with. All right, let's continue.
Our country so much. Senator Harris, the coronavirus is not under control. Over the past week, Johns Hopkins reports that 39 states have had more COVID cases over the past 7 days than in the week before. 9 states have set new records. Even if a vaccine is released soon, the next administration will face hard choices. What would a Biden administration do in January and February that a Trump administration wouldn't do? Would you impose new lockdowns for businesses and schools and hotspots? A federal mandate to wear masks? You have 2 minutes to respond.
Okay. The last 2 pieces of that question were actually good questions, right? What's the deal? What's the deal with the lockdowns? You guys are basically flip-flopping on it. What's the deal with the mask mandate? You guys are flip-flopping on it. Basically, answer that. Answer that. What you're talking about with additional lockdowns and what you're talking about with mask mandates, because they've been very unclear of whether they're for it or they're against it. They just keep saying believe the science. And Kamala gave so much of an answer, right? But she spent all that time setting the framing of that question to just get to something that basically Harris was going to ignore. She should not have given Harris any help. It should have been basically, coronavirus obviously has affected this country greatly. We've dealt with lockdowns. We've dealt with the spread and so on. And it's basically everybody's talking about it. It's a very important issue to the American people. But basically, what in addition to what the Trump administration has been doing do you want to do? Would you like to, you've discussed essentially extending lockdowns 3 months. You've discussed a national mask mandate, but those things have been walked back. What is the Biden-Harris stance on what will be done differently regarding masks and lockdowns? Right? I mean, how hard is that to ask that question? Right? It's shorter. It doesn't beg the answer. Right? Now, if you ask something like that, you can say basically, Pence, would you like to respond to that? And then Pence would respond to that, basically whatever her answer is, and then Kamala would be able to basically respond for a shorter amount of time. Then you've moved on to the second question. But that's not what happened here, right? She basically set Kamala up, and then the first thing she does, instead of giving Mike Pence a chance to actually respond to what Kamala's saying, what the hell? Why did she have her hand up?
And Joe Biden is the best leader to do that. And
yeah, whatever. This is the last thing she says. Listen to what she does, not her.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, more than 210,000 Americans have died.
Just let's Kamala make her assertions, saying, I mean, she just ended with, you're just basically they should be disqualified for whatever reason, right? That's a pretty stout thing to just say. Okay. Now I'm going to lead to the next question. That's basically just a further attack on. She's literally just adding to the stuff Kamala said, and at no point challenging Kamala for not answering the question. You can't do that as a moderator. I mean, you can do that. We watched it happen, but that's not fair. That's not fair. Basically, if she wanted to ask this question to Pence, she needed to give Pence a chance to respond to what Kamala just said, and then a chance for Kamala to respond back, and then if there's a little debate there, okay, boom, and then move on to the second question, which this is an accusation. This is another softball for Harris, essentially, but this is a respond to something I'm saying that I'm going to say something disparaging, and now you have to refute it, versus what Harris said. Harris's question was basically, I'm going to say something disparaging against the Trump administration. Please pile on. So, here we go.
Of COVID-19 since February. The U.S. death toll as a percentage of our population is higher than that of almost every other wealthy nation on Earth. For instance, our death rate is 2.5 times that of Canada next door. You head the administration's coronavirus task force. Why is the U.S. death toll as a percentage of our population higher than that of almost every other wealthy country?
So, first of all, those numbers, that's all BS. That's completely a conjecture because we don't have good data from the other countries. We only have data from the US, and the data we have in the US is largely overreported, right? I mean, that 200,000 number, basically Oxford study came out that week, like basically the week after analyzing the numbers, and they're like, at minimum 30% of these are actually just not COVID related at all. It's just a death with COVID. And we're not even sure. It might be higher than that, because nobody's actually looked into the hard numbers. We've given hospitals essentially the incentive to report deaths as COVID. As long as someone tests positive for COVID, they report it as a COVID death, because then it's basically they get an extra $5,000 from the government, right? So we've created a problem for ourselves. I don't think this was that portion of things wasn't necessarily handled correctly by the administration, because I think they essentially incentivized over-reporting. But getting into the weeds with all the numbers and stuff, Pence knows he can't do that, because I'm sitting here explaining that, and me just talking about that ate up 2/3 of his time, and he wouldn't even get to respond to what the things Harris said. He ignores that question, and he just responds as if the moderator had just basically given him a chance to respond to Harris. And Trump would have probably punched first at the question, and then tried to lean back to punch back at, I guess, Biden in that case, because if Biden had said the same thing Harris did, and it would have been messy. It would have been bombastic. Everybody would have been out. The right would have been like, "Oh, that question's stupid." Like angry, right? Pence, I was getting pissed off when I heard that. When I heard that was the first two questions, and Pence didn't even get a chance to respond to what Harris opened with. That was. I was actually mad. I was like, yeah, this is gonna be I'm ready to fight. Pence, no, you see him? He's very zen right now, and he just said basically, all right, I am losing on this question, and there's nothing I can do about it. How can I lose the least, right? Because if he answers Kamala, he didn't answer the question, and if he answers the moderator's question, he didn't answer Kamala. So which was the more damaging of the attacks that he needs to respond to? And he decided at this point, and I'm sure he decided this ahead of time, his focus and who he was going to be responding to was Kamala Harris. It was not the wishy-washy BS narrative that not strictly the narrative that the moderator was going to be presenting. Even though that is a left-wing narrative, he was going to directly refute what Kamala Harris was saying. Directly refute essentially what the Biden campaign was saying. And really what the lefty journalists are saying as well, right? He could respond to Harris, and he could still essentially take a pot shot at all the journalists who were going to be saying that stuff. He knew that. He was disciplined. And this was an absolute slaughter. I get it's probably was boring to some people. But the people who it was boring to probably were like, yeah, Trump getting in arguments was awesome, right? So it's important that this debate was somewhat boring. But to me, it was really seeing the difference between basically a lifelong statesman who's a family man and calm and everything that Joe Biden pretends to be is faithful, right? Is Mike Pence. Versus Donald Trump, who's the bombastic businessman sales guy, right? Here's the Lincoln. Trump's the Ford F-150 Raptor that you probably don't get good gas mileage because you drive it like a maniac, but damn, it's cool and it's a lot of fun, and he's got the big American flag painted on the back. Mike Pence, he is the full-size luxury Lincoln sedan, or maybe luxury Lincoln SUV, right? Where it's got the same drivetrain, it's got the four-wheel drive, it's raised up, but it's very comfortable, and it's quiet, and it's got the same towing capacity, but it's a more nuanced approach. It's a more comfortable ride. You're both going to the same place, but when you ride with Pence, it's a lot more pleasant. That's the difference between essentially Mike Pence and Donald Trump. And with Harris, you really didn't get that. You just got like I'm Goofy Joe, and then you got like nasty Kamala. Kamala Harris was just unpleasant that whole time. When look at their cameras are different. I like the Fox camera because it was just split screen the whole time. I thought that was actually superior. I don't like it when that when they cut back and forth, because then it's like, oh, the producer has to decide. It's better if you could just watch both of them, because your attention's only going one side or the other, and as long as it's like holding with the split screen, it's fine. So I don't like this because this just seems over. This somebody can then say, oh well, you kept the camera on X person longer than. Basically Fox just said nope. One split down the middle. When a moderator is asking a question, we will cut to the moderator, and then when anybody's responding, period, we cut to both of them. So yeah, 2 minutes of Kamala Harris talking and nobody saying anything, like a long Metal Gear Solid codec call, right? But you got to see how the people reacted, and that hurt Harris a lot. Harris was making faces and being nasty. It was, it was like a snotty teenager debating the dad from Leave It to Beaver. That's pretty much what people saw, and this is going to make basically skeptical conservatives a lot more comfortable. And what all the stuff Harris said, particularly trying to defend her law enforcement record and all this other stuff, like that's going to make the far left very uncomfortable. She doubled back on a lot of the left-wing policies. I mean, even AOC was like, oh, yeah, fracking is actually bad. And like she's the one who endorsed the Green New Deal, which banned fracking. So, and Biden has said he wants to end she created so many attack ads where it's like, yeah, they're saying stuff, but they're just lying, Pence nailed her to the wall on the tax cut thing. He absolutely eliminated her on that because she kept saying, oh, the Trump administration's lying about so-and-so. And then he was like, well, you guys are going to repeal the Trump tax cuts. And then he said, okay, you're going to not repeal the part of the tax cut that lowers the taxes of everybody who makes under $400,000? And she couldn't answer because she wasn't ready for that. She was ready for the stereotypical responses, and instead it was basically mastercrafted from Pence. I used to think after the Trump administration, 2024, hopefully, God willing, that I'd like somebody else to take over. I'd like it to be a Rand Paul or a Crenshaw, somebody who's young, and well, not that Rand Paul's going to be young by that point, but more on the libertarian side, moving away from that kind of classic conservative. But then I see Mike Pence here, and I'm just like, this is the reason why. It's just like, it's that calm father figure. He's selling most of the same stuff. I probably don't agree with him on everything. He was, he just allowed electrotherapy in his state, right, for electroconversion therapy, which isn't a good thing. But in fairness, he didn't force anybody into it. He said, okay, if you guys want to do that, go for it. I don't agree with that decision, but it's not a deal breaker for me because it's not like anybody was being forced to do it. But he's kind of old school. Do I expect him to understand that video games don't cause violence? Probably not. But I also don't expect him to do anything insane. And if I didn't know how Trump had been governing the last 4 years, it wouldn't even be a question. I'd prefer Mike Pence over Donald Trump being leader. Right now, Donald Trump is the right guy because he drives the media up the wall, and he's the only person with basically the thick enough skin and is a tough enough fighter to deal with the attacks that have been thrown at him. And Mike Pence being there as his wingman, I thought Pence was an innocuous choice. It turns out Pence is a brilliant choice. I don't know whether Trump got lucky or Trump had met Pence and knew that Pence was essentially as disciplined and crafted. Pence is every bit of the skilled politician that Donald Trump is not. And he not only that, he comes off more trustworthy than Donald Trump, which is insane. For somebody who's a career politician, they talk a certain way, like the way Hillary talked, the way Kamala talks, the way Biden talked. It's this kind of like condescending, but like righteous, like it comes off like slimy politician talk, right? And let's just say Trump comes off like sales, kind of slimy sales talk, but that's still more trustworthy than the slimy politician talk. Mike Pence comes off like, your dad. Or I should say the dad everybody, thinks they want to have. Calm, direct, firm, but not obnoxious. Moral, but not moralizing. He's kind of like, he's the the Republican president of like the Christian direct to video movie, right? Where like he's just a little too perfect. Like someone like that doesn't exist. Oh, you mean he's calm and he's moral and he's got all the like he almost doesn't seem real, right? But he feels so authentic compared to like Mitt Romney, right? They tried to make Mitt Romney to be out to be this guy. No, not at all. Not at all. Mike Pence, he's the real deal. Mitt Romney, he came off like a robot, and he was a really shitty debater. Mike Pence, I mean, that was masterful. That was absolutely masterful. So we'll see. I mean, or to say, Frank Luntz, he had his panel where he has like, he does like the polls and live reactions, and he has like 15 undecided voters, which he always manages to find like the dumbest people in the country to be in these panels, and he's cynical. Like he hates Donald Trump. He's super cynical. He also looks like he's been through like a war because he's got like a beard and he just I don't know. It's just funny. But he had to admit that basically Pence absolutely dominated. He was like, well, they didn't like it when he overran his time, but Kamala Harris came off as XYZ like nasty essentially, and he had to admit that basically Pence absolutely dominated this debate. He absolutely crushed it. And the Democrat, this isn't going to do a whole lot of damage unless the far left actually picks up on what Kamala was saying, because there's a lot of own goals against Kamala where she kind of was like refuting things that were far left that the far left were tolerating. I mean, the fact that she touted her prosecution record in California. Like, yeah, we're going to do this. It's like she's appealing to the moderates. I got news to you. You can't out-appeal to the moderates compared to what Mike Pence just did in terms of calm leadership. Moderates don't even have to agree with Mike Pence, but they trust him just in the way he's delivering things. Kamala, I mean, she's trying, but she's got all this far-left baggage, and in her attempt to pivot, she comes off unauthentic, basically to pivot immediately to the center. She comes off inauthentic, and, that's going to piss off the moderates, and I suspect the far left, who are the ones who are like, well, we can bully Biden, we're not so sure about this Kamala choice, are going to see this, and they're going to be like, yeah, she's pretty much revving up to be president, and she's going to be obnoxious, so, we might get some of the things we want, but, we won't get the communist revolution we want, we won't get the Green New Deal, we won't get the bans on fracking and all this other stuff, which is funny, because she says, he will not ban fracking, and then 2 seconds later, she's like, and fossil fuels by 2030 will not be used in it. It's like, well, what do you think fracking does? It gets natural gas, oil, and basically other hydrocarbons out of the ground in ways we couldn't get before. If you're banning the use of hydrocarbons, then you're banning fracking effectively. Like nobody's going to frack if in 10 years, essentially, you can't either sell that land or sell that energy or continue it to be profitable. It's an effective ban on fracking. If you're just saying, well, there's going to be no emissions, right? Well, you can't produce energy without some sort of emission, right? In fact, the way they're going to do zero emissions is to go to places like China and Africa and say, oh yeah, dig up lithium, one of the dirtiest mining jobs on the planet, and put that in batteries and sell it to us so we can put that in our electric cars and say, we have zero emissions. All while they shut down nuclear power plants. I am surprised with how incompetent the Biden-Harris ticket has been on the environment. They've been completely incoherent. Pence, in his answer, I forget where it was actually pretty early on, his answers on the environment, he absolutely bodied her. That was impressive. And, he came off sane and rational, and he also did point out the whole thing with the Paris Climate Accord that was like, yeah, we're the only ones who actually met the demands they actually had in terms of carbon carbon emissions reduction. We actually met that, and we weren't even in the climate accord. All the countries that were signed onto it, all of them failed. So we have cleaner air, we have cleaner water, and he talked about the forest management and stuff, and like he pivoted really, really well, and I think he made people, unless you're one of those like die-hard, world's going to end in 12 years like an AOC, he was very comfortable because it wasn't we don't care about the environment. The economy is more important than the environment. Because that's the thing. Is the economy more important than the environment? Yes it is. In a big macro scale, in the grand scheme of things, yes it is. But can you say that on a stage without somebody taking it to mean the absolute extreme? No, you can't. And Pence here knew that, and he brilliantly crafted his argument, completely dodging having to say something like that. And a lot of that is just because, he's got the Trump administration has a better record on the environment than the Obama administration. By far. I don't think they realized when they chose Biden as the safe option that this is a referendum on Obama 2.0. And I think this is, if Biden loses, it's going to be Barack Obama. Because Barack Obama put Hillary Clinton in a really bad spot, but Hillary was completely unpalatable anyway, so, you could kind of argue like, oh, well, Obama was still popular. But now you've got essentially all the Obama policies, all that ammo that basically Trump got to fire at Hillary Clinton because of basically she was the representing the incumbent administration. He now gets to reuse all of that ammo on Barack Obama and his record. And I'm sorry, on Joe Biden, and because the Biden-Obama record now is all tied together, right? He gets to reuse all of that this election cycle, and I don't think the Democrats fully thought that out. Their only option is basically to get people afraid of Donald Trump and afraid of COVID and afraid of XYZ. But if Mike Pence is out here delivering foreign policy answers and being like one of the most like calming Zen guys imaginable, and Kamala Harris is just saying, no, you need to be afraid, you need to be scared. Trump's scary and COVID is scary, and then you got somebody like Mike Pence who sounds a lot more reasonable. I don't know how that's going to fly. Now, how many people are undecided at this point? I don't know. I don't know how many undecided voters there are. Some polls say it's like 4%, and other polls say it's more like 15. I don't know. I doubt there's that many undecided, but it's a matter of basically who's being demoralized. If people don't think Trump can keep it together because he had a crappy debate performance or they're angry, they're going to not show up, and they're not going to show up to vote for him. They might like him, but they're not going to be motivated to go out to vote for him. But if those same people, they see Mike Pence, and they're going to be willing to go hold their nose to vote for Mike Pence. Kamala, on the other hand, people who are already holding their nose to vote for Joe Biden because they're just hoping he'll basically drop dead or be steamrolled by the far left, now they got to contend with Kamala, and Kamala is completely unpalatable. You have to believe her own special brand of bullshit, otherwise Kamala is unpalatable. And one of the reasons we know this is because of how poor she did in the primary. If she had 15, 16% in the primary, this would be a different story. Because then you could argue, all right, well, she didn't market herself right. She was positioned improperly. She was from California. The media gave attention to XYZ a little more. You can make those kind of arguments. But in this case here with Kamala, she got, what was it, 7% in her home state, and overall, like was it like 1 or 2% of the primary vote? Less than that, I guess, if you count in stuff after she dropped out. She was not popular at all. She was not liked. There wasn't any fan base she was bringing in. I mean, if Bernie had brought in, yeah, they would have been struggling for the middle, but they would have brought in an inherent diehard fan base, right? He'd be in a lot stronger position. If he brought in Buttigieg is a complete unknown, right? He has no record. He's like a Barack Obama. He basically has no record other than just some, he did a shitty job of running a town, but that's, there's only so much you can talk about with something like that. And then they would have had the image of Mike Pence, the king of lightning, having to debate, Buttigieg, the first gay vice presidential candidate or something, right? They would have had like a huge optics win, and it wouldn't have mattered what Mike Pence said, because he would have played Buttigieg would have played the personal oppression card, and they would have said, just the fact he was able to stand on stage with Mike Pence, and really face down. That would be the entire narrative. And they blew that. They didn't want that. They said they had to choose a woman. And on top of that, they had, Klobuchar, who would have been a lot more formidable. And yeah, Klobuchar's not likable, but she's still more likable than Kamala Harris was. And we know that because the Dems voted for her. Klobuchar's from a swing state. Kamala Harris is not from a swing state. She's from California. They see somebody like here's the thing. Arizona sees somebody like Kamala Harris from California, and they go, this is the exact type of person I hate, who's moving here, who's ruining my state. So Kamala Harris motivates essentially these swing states that are turning blue. It motivates the red to come out because she's a direct representation of that California poison that's coming in. Same with Texas, right? They see Kamala Harris and they go, all right, we got a guy from the Northeast who's like half brain dead from Delaware. He doesn't know shit about Texas. And we've got Kamala Harris from San Francisco. Like, the average Texan's going to be like, yeah, okay, no. Even if you're like a Texas Democrat, right? you know these people don't understand you, and you know these people do not give a crap about you. So, because none of their concerns are your concerns. Was there any issue there that was a swing state issue that they talked about that had any meaningful effect? The environment. The environment goes two ways. Red states, it goes basically be responsible with the environment and don't overdo it. In blue states, it's the initiate fascist policies to like end carbon fuel use and all this other stuff, right? Hydrocarbon use, essentially. That's the two sides. And then one side says you're a science denier, and the other side says you don't know economics. And really, I'd like to say, oh, this is balanced, but no, the science denier, the people who are saying that the other side are science deniers, they really don't understand economics. They usually don't even understand science. But that in the media they get a pass. Bill Nye says climate change is the number one threat to this world, so therefore it's the number one threat to this world to some people. Fine, whatever. It's a tough argument to win, but in like swing states, it's not good. Like this fracking stuff. Yeah, okay. People in Philadelphia and people in Pittsburgh and the Pennsylvania Democrats, they love this. Oh my God, fracking is terrible and all this. They love hearing that shit. But really, they're not going to be nearly as motivated to go out and vote against fracking as the people who live upstate in Williamsport, in basically the middle of the state where like the fracking is occurring, and all these basically hundreds of thousands of jobs that have come back to Pennsylvania, despite the governor's best efforts, let's say. Those people are going to say my livelihood is on the line. He's saying not ban fracking, but he's being super unclear about that, and they're essentially endorsing the Green New Deal. I don't trust them. So those people, their livelihoods are on the line. They'll actually go out and vote for Trump, or really to vote against Biden to make sure they can keep their jobs. The people who are just like, oh yeah, is fracking banned or whatever, like I just want somebody I can trust as a better steward of the environment. You're not going to be able to convince that person that, the Trump administration's done a better job than the Obama administration did. Despite that being factual, it doesn't matter. You can't convince them. But that person's not nearly as motivated as somebody who's like trying to feed their family off of the fracking job they got. So this was, again, it's going to depend on who watches, because the vice presidential debates always have notoriously low viewership, right? And the first presidential debate had pretty low viewership as well. All things considered, pretty low viewership. Lots of after coverage. I saw a lot of people talking about saying, oh, I turned it off immediately because it was too combative. And then they got a lot to say about it after the fact, having not watched it. But the vice presidential debate, I think the media, I think they're going to have to ignore it, because the more they talk about it, there's no good clips from this. There's not even really anything they can take out of context and show Kamala, because she's got this goofy look on her face, and she's like, she just comes off really uncompelling to be nice about it. And Mike Pence, every clip they have, oh well, he says something outrageous. He didn't say anything outrageous, because nothing he said he didn't say anything in an outrageous way. He could have said, and we're going to bring back electroshock therapy for everybody, and like half the country would have been like, oh, that's so soothing, that sounds great, because of the way he talks. So yeah, it's a clash of personalities, and I'm sorry, Mike Pence beats Kamala Harris hands down, and Trump's his own worst enemy in a lot of ways, and Mike Pence is the ultimate presidential wingman. And like I said before, it's like, yeah, I was thinking, 2024 we should get somebody else, but like I'm like, you know what, man, Mike Pence, we could definitely do worse. He's good. He's really good. He's smart. He's calm. He's collected. We don't deserve Mike Pence. And again, he's been better. I didn't know much about him as when he was governor of Indiana. I've learned obviously much more since he was nominated as VP and since he's been VP, and he's been absolutely outstanding. I don't know why. I don't know why Democrats seem to think that he's like some kind of liability. It's like, oh, well, the only reason they're not impeaching Trump because they don't want a President Pence. I was like, really, guys? Really? You think so? You think Pence wouldn't be able to handle that way better? I mean, here's the thing. They should look at Gerald Ford's popularity post Nixon impeachment, right? Not before he pardoned him, but I should say not after he pardoned him, but before he pardoned him when Gerald Ford took over, right? Gerald Ford had something like 57% approval. Nixon had something like 61% approval, and that was obviously before Watergate and before he had to step down, right? So Nixon was extremely popular, and guess what? Pence or say Ford was also extremely popular, but Ford was set up to win. He lost his election because he pardoned Nixon. That's why he lost, because the media basically just savaged him, and people didn't understand why he did that. And then, ironically enough, Carter then pardoned Ford because it was a witch hunt, basically. It was over, Nixon acted alone. Ford had nothing to do with it, because they were alleging that, oh well, Ford, you only were chosen as vice president because you agreed to pardon Nixon, which was nonsense. And at least Carter understood that was nonsense. Not that he stood up for Ford when Ford was being accused of this during the campaign, but he did ultimately do the right thing and pardon him. But we gotta remember, if this is a case where Donald Trump gets impeached for something and it's super contentious, Mike Pence will come out on top. Like he's gonna be invincible, because even people who don't like Donald Trump and are like, whatever, okay, he got impeached, I give up with him. They're gonna see somebody like Mike Pence be calm, in charge, reasonable, uniting, like a Gerald Ford type character, and they're gonna create an unbelievable, invincible monster. So I think that's why the left avoids Mike Pence, not because they think that. Because, really, if you impeach Trump and you thought, Republicans were so crappy, then why would you not just have, Pence for another? Because wouldn't Pence be easier to beat, right? He doesn't have the cult of personality that Trump has, right? You'd think that's the case? No. Somebody at the DNC was smart enough to go, this Mike Pence guy, we want to give him as least amount of attention as possible because he makes us look like raving jackasses. Trump's a bit of a jackass. He's a buffoon. We know that, but he's our guy, and that's why we put up with it. Pence is so much classier than what the Democrats have brought forward. So we'll see what happens. I'm gonna end this long ass recording, but I think it's interesting. Also, I think you understand essentially how these questions were set up. You can see the same thing in the Wallace debate. I suspect that the next debate is going to have the same thing. I didn't have the screen capture stuff up for our last one. I think I'll do this for the next one as well. So that's all, and have a good night, and vote for Trump, man. Come on, I mean, you don't want whatever that was from Harris, whatever that was. You don't want that. Even that fly was like, yo, when the fly landed on him. Now, normally you think oh, that's a bad thing, but for me, it reminded me of a guy who's Zen, and he's like being calm, and he's got the, he's floating in place, and then the bird lands on him or the bug lands on him, and he doesn't even move because he's just so calming. That's what it came off to me like. I've never seen a fly land and just chill out on somebody like that. Normally they're shaking around and they keep just taking off land. This time the fly just I'm gonna just chill off for a little bit. I'm good. Let's see where it is. No, it's not here yet. I don't remember what point that happened. It was kind of funny. I'm sure the left is going to be so clever with their memes and say, well, flies are attracted to shit. So I can't wait for those memes tomorrow. They're just gonna be so original, so spicy, and I would have never thought to say something like that, right? Just so smart. But this debate was a disaster for the Democrats. So I can sleep well knowing that.